It's a little bit different, I'm guessing, than it is in Dallas, Texas today, which is where we catch up with Rik Heller. Rik, what's the temperature there today?
Goodness, you didn't tell me you would ask me that. It's a beautiful, maybe 60 degrees.
60 at the moment?
Yeah, at the moment.
Beautiful, and it's going to be warmer too. I know. I say that because it just makes me jealous of you for living in a place where it's warm right now. Rik is with us this morning. He's actually with us for a very serious reason. He is an infectious disease analyst, the founder of Wello, the first hands-free self-service temperature screening device. And our conversation is brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Rik, I wanted to get you on today to talk about the latest in the variants to come our way in the COVID-19 crisis, the Omicron, what is it, B.A. Is that the way it's referred to now?
Yeah, that's correct. But, it's interesting because, influenza kicks around since World War I, at least when we sort of decided what it was called and what it was. And it does this every year, every two semesters, every 6 months. And so here we are naming these things. So it's kind of exciting from a disease spread point of view to understand a little bit more. It's, in my mind, it's effectively the same. It spreads very well. That's why these things, reach this conversation level in radio. And so what we're really looking for is how bad is the spread. And that's a function of so many things. And, in Europe where it's moving quickly through the northwest, that would be, the Holland, France, Spain area. It's there's population movement and sadly, from Eastern Europe. And so this is going to make an accelerant there until our bodies produce enough antibodies and enough people have those antibodies. So it hasn't reached here. The good news is we're down 95% or so on the most recent Omicron we had in January. And by the way, that was, and a lot of people don't know this, that was about 5 or 10 times the very height of COVID as we knew it in 2021.
Yeah. So
we're greatly reduced from an incredible uptick, and in that uptick, it behaves like the common cold. The common cold can be several things, but one of the most common ones is a coronavirus. So it's not going to reduce necessarily a common cold, at least these years, because we're always going to have these problems of hospitalization, particularly for the elderly and the comorbidities. And still, and we're going to pay attention to those because now we're paying attention more than ever to every aspect of this outbreak.
Well, that's the big question that people have is this something we're going to have to continually deal with for the rest of our lives? Every time something comes along, we're going to give it a name, we're going to track it, we're going to put out some pretty alarmist type of reactions to it. And are those reactions justified? Is it as dangerous as at one time we knew COVID-19 to be?
COVID-19 started out completely out of the blue to, medical science. Even though we had SARS and we have a thing in Saudi Arabia called MERS, they're both coronaviruses, they're cousins of one another. So I'm sorry, I lost the question.
Well, the question is are we overly alarmed about these things because now they have names and they get into the news media and we get numbers about the tenacity of it and the prevalence of it and is it something that is just going to overwhelm us that we're always going to be doing this?
I don't think so. I think, and this is outside my area, it's like sociology, how we're going to respond to this. Public health wants a maximum response. So they may go on the side of caution, which is, a little bit more on the hysteria scale. And I use that word actually lightly. Mm-hmm. And now I think so many of us are used to it, if not tired of it. But it is going to come back, and it's going to take some of our loved ones, specifically, from that disease. So we're going to need to be careful. But, out of all the things that it could possibly be, I can tell you from our point of view and the millions of records that we've collected, particularly at manufacturers where there are 300 or 400 people per day scanning in with temperature, that what we see is that the so-called quarantine that we all had to do is necessary, but only one person. If you feel symptoms, if you feel a respiratory, onset, you need to stay home. And even the testing of the asymptomatic, if you just go in and get a test, it's not that interesting to super spreading. This whole thing, this whole epidemic, pandemic, the outbreaks are all built out of one person. And, you could go to 2 or 3 in a wedding, 200 or 300 people there. And these 2 or 3 people are going to super spread, and it is very likely that those 2 or 3 people are more symptomatic than anybody else. So the worry about asymptomatic, we're a little less concerned about when we look at the whole pandemic. Certainly you can worry if you have a positive test. But the biggest thing is if you're symptomatic. And the number one mistake that we make in public health in particular is we say it's 98.6 degrees is a normal temperature for adults. It's not. 97.6 for 25 years, the studies have come out in multiples that 97.6 is your temperature measured orally. And that if you're 60 years and older and you're 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, you're symptomatic, you're likely to have an infection.
So what are some of the steps that we can take with this one, the Omicron B.A.2, or whatever the next one is that comes along? What are some of the things that we should be aware of that we should be doing?
Well, from the point of view, you have to look at it as a public health. We look at it as public health. So one person, since they can spread, and by the way, out of 100 people, they all got spread from the same 10. So it's about 10% spreading it to 90%. So when you kind of twist your thinking around towards public health, it's that one person who can, in a sense, quarantine themselves, stay home from work, from school, or whatever. And I'm sorry to the employers that will be missing an employee, but it will likely keep other employees safe and return to work or be at work.
Yeah.
So that's the case. It's quarantine yourself, not everybody. And obviously the masking does work, particularly in these high exponentials that we just went through in January. And so, masking can help when you have these outbreaks. And particularly we're trying to protect elderly and people with chronic diseases. They're the most susceptible to death and hospitalization.
And so there are certain things that we can track and we can follow and find out, okay, well, that number is off a little bit, and therefore we need to pay extra special attention because we might be infected. And as you mentioned, temperature is probably the first thing we look at. So tell me about this Wella. What is this thing?
Wella Station is a self-service device. You walk up to it and you simply look into it. It's like a mirror, and it takes your temperature, and it does it in a special area of the face called the inner canthus and the lower. It's right at the lower forehead. And in that place, it's just normal temperature 99% of the time. But when you do have a fever, that area lights up to what's called far infrared. And in lighting up, we do some tracking of individuals without knowing who they are or anything, but we can actually track them through a barcode that they present or an RFID or just about anything. We can actually see that they could be fevered at 98.2. I mean, it's very common to see people in the 98s who test positive for COVID. So the next thing you want to do is once you feel it coming on, that's when you go and get a test. And I was just at the grocery store the other day, and they were right there at the checkout counter, and they were half the price or a quarter of the price of what we saw sometime 6 months ago.
Yeah. It's interesting. We get those people showing up to get tests or to get some sort of medical thing done, and we're testing for infectious diseases, and we're standing in a big old line right next to each other, breathing, laughing, whatever it happens to be that we're doing around each other, and so that the distancing between one to another is pretty important too, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I find myself all the time now. I mean, even, hugging and kissing family, when we get together and things like that, that's, we've made a lot of distance that we otherwise used to do. So when I'm walking into stores and somebody's coming at me one way, I try to give them, 4 or 5 feet. And then I know this may sound neurotic, but I do hold my breath until I feel like I'm in the clear from another person's
Hey, Rick, we all do. You walk down the hall, somebody's coming your other way, you automatically draw in the breath and then keep it until you're past that person, which is funny because that person just exhaled, and so everything in them went out, and that's what you're now breathing in. It's amazing the way that it works. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us today to talk about it. Where are we going to learn more about Wello?
So Wello Inc., hello Wello, it's welloinc.com. Inc. is I-N-C. And we look forward to you visiting and hearing from you.
Very good, very good. Thanks, Rick. Have a great day today.
Thank you.
It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM and AM